right, welcome back everybody to the Hector and Mike Experience. Common sense in an uncommon world, and in this episode it may be common sense in a crazy world that we're living in, especially out here on the West Coast. Hector, there was a story recently about some police officers in San Francisco, brave souls that they are just to be police officers in that place, going in to get a bite to eat while on duty, taking their lunch break, and they weren't too welcome, even though they were willing to pay and everything else. They were asked to leave. Tell us about that.
Well, and the absurdity with the story, Mike, is they're coming in. They want to grab a bite to eat. They are obviously in their uniform. They've got their sidearms with them, and when they get in and they sit down, some of the employees at this restaurant in San Francisco, which is Hilda and Jesse restaurant in San Francisco, the employees go out and tell the management, says, we don't feel comfortable, we don't feel safe because these individuals have weapons on them. They're police officers, and so the management goes over to the police officers and asks them to leave. And you've got the owners who that very same day took to social media and defended their action and said, this restaurant is a safe place. Mm-hmm. And if those officers want to come back during their off duty, if they want to come back on another day when they're not carrying their sidearms or carrying, their firearms, we would be more than happy to serve them. Well, as you can imagine, Mike, that created a firestorm of controversy. There was, it made national news, a lot of comments coming in. And so just, a couple of days later, one of the owners said, well, we handled it incorrectly. Mm-hmm. It's a teaching moment. and so, we welcome anyone who wants to come in, police officers, law enforcement, to come in. And what I find this disturbing is in many other places, there are discounts for first responders. In many other places, majority of places, police officers, firefighters, and so forth, they're welcome to come into place of establishment. Mm-hmm. I mean, these, especially in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, and a lot of these other places, I mean, they're the front line to the anarchy that is happening right now in California. They're the ones who are having to deal with the robberies, the killings. They're having to deal with these retail thefts now. At the same time, they're also the ones being attacked by this whole progressive left that basically wants to blame police officers for everything that's happening in society. And I mean, the other part that really strikes me is this, how we've gotten so soft as a society where if we see a police officer with a sidearm, all of a sudden we feel less safe, or we feel, threatened, or we need a quote unquote safe place in order to function. I mean, it's like, what's happening to the state?
If you're looking for a safe place, this is not the place to find it. Let's just put that right out there, that the Hector and Mike Experience is not a place that is a safe place. It really does show, and it's important. I think this is important. We all say how wacky San Francisco is, and we'll talk about more stuff in San Francisco in a few minutes. But think about it for a second. You're in a city that is in complete anarchy. You have emojis on maps showing where people pooped on the street, okay? You have people that are doing smash and grabs into high-end stores, low-end stores, and everything in between. You have people you have a city that is paying known felons that are criminals, violent, not to commit crime. They're paying them not to commit crime. And now you have a situation where amidst all of that, you're sitting in a restaurant and 3 police officers, or however many it was, walk in to have lunch. If you're in the middle of a place that's burning and you see 3 people walk in that are your safety, that ensures that while you're sitting there having your turkey sandwich or whatever the heck you're having, you're going to be safe. And your response is to have a negative reaction to them because they have a sidearm and a weapon. It just shows you how screwed up and messed up San Francisco is. It just shows that it's literally an alternate universe of what I think, not just left and right America, mainstream America on both the left and the right think. And what's important about that for people to understand and why it matters, the number one person in the House of Representatives is from San Francisco. The number one person in state government, the governor, is from San Francisco. The number one top cop prosecutor in the state, the attorney general, is from San Francisco. And the vice president of the United States, who's a half a heartbeat away from the presidency, is from San Francisco. These are people that grew up with these kind of values and you know, look at this kind of thing from a completely different lens than what I think just about anybody else does. And that's a pretty scary thought, because that place, to have that kind of situation, is just incredible. And it's funny because they did come back and they apologized. They said it was a teachable moment. But why did that happen? It happened because there was so much public pressure put on those people from social media. And remember, this was something they bragged about. This was something they beat their chest about. They just didn't say, look, you know, some of our patrons and our service staff, they don't feel comfortable with the weapons. You know, can you go someplace else? They just didn't do that. They posted it proudly on their Instagram. They posted it proudly on their social media that you know, law enforcement officers having weapons are not welcome because this is a safe place. And so they caught the feedback for it. And, you know, the two owners immediately decided, well, we better cut our losses, which I thought was kind of funny because it's a very capitalist thing to do, to recognize that you did something you should not have done and it's going to affect your business. So they immediately, you know, forget their high moral ground thing. They immediately thought, well, the bottom line is nobody's going to come in and buy my turkey sandwich, so I better apologize for this. You know, a little bit hypocritical there, but it just shows how plain out crazy that place is. But again, it's the kind of thing that you look at and say, if it was just an isolated like island someplace, you know, an island of an alternate universe, it would be one thing. You know, if it was a small place in southern Texas or, you know, North Dakota or someplace. But this is a place that is a laboratory for the leadership of our state and for our country at this point in time. And that should scare the living bejesus out of everybody.
Well, the governor likes to often promote, when he was mayor of San Francisco, he would say, you know, people are going to look to San Francisco as being a leader. He does the same thing now that he's governor of California. He says people, you know, other states are going to look to California as the leader. Mm-hmm. Well, and he talked about the same thing with when he dealt with Proposition 47. There was a quote that he gave when Proposition 47 was being, you know, debated as a measure. And with Proposition 47, it basically reduced a lot of property crimes and drug crimes and made them from felonies into misdemeanors. And there's a stipulation there on the property theft. As long as you steal if someone steals under $950, then that would be considered a misdemeanor and no longer a felony. Well, what you're having now is you have got police officers that end up catching individuals with calculators in stores, right, so that they stay under the 950 mark threshold. And in his quote, the governor's quote, he said, you know, this may be radical, but it's the right thing to do. And we will see that over time, states, you know, the other states across this country will look to California as the leader, and they will follow our lead. Well, he was right. Other states are looking to California with this measure that got passed, but they're not looking at California in the way the governor had hoped. They're looking at California and wondering, how the heck is all this stuff happening in such a progressive state? And in one of the discussions you and I, Mike, have had is a lot of it comes down to human nature. The human nature of, if I can steal at a Walgreens or CVS and I can get away with it, if the security guards aren't going to do anything, if the police aren't going to be called out, then why not go and steal from higher end department stores? And it's just that human nature. If you think you can get away with it, you're going to get away with it. But
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, and it's part of it is, I think it's a cultural thing that we're beginning to see. It's these, I don't know, these softies, you know, where they can't see a police officer with a firearm, where you're getting these other softies who are also having an issue because you've got certain people in society that have been successful and they want to, they want to talk down about them, or math, all of a sudden math, we don't want to teach algebra, or we don't want to have gifted programs because it's going to make other people feel lesser, or we don't want to give out, F's, C's, D's, and F's because all of a sudden it's going to make other people feel inferior. And it's like, where have we gotten so freaking soft in this society where they've got to do all these different changes and measures because it may or may not offend someone? I mean, what's happening now, even within the language of Spanish, is you've got this movement that wants to, rather than say Latino or Latina, they want to use Latinx because they want to be inclusive in gender. They don't want to offend someone because, you call the car if male or female, the chair is referred to as male or female. And so la silla, el carro. And so they want to put an X behind everything as opposed to doing the O and the A to designate it. And it's just like, it's bizarre.
Oh boy. Well, there's a lot there, and let's just start with this. Let's start at this point. You bring up a great point. Overall, what is going on? There is this, and it's important to understand. These people that go out and commit these crimes have long criminal histories, and it's not that they think they can get away with it. They can get away with it. They are getting away with it. That's the issue. They are getting away with it. And you're right about, I always used to debate, do you use the word Latino or Hispanic? I mean, I never even got to the vowel part at the end of the word, for Pete's sake, So, and you're right, there's a police officer with a gun. Well, what did you expect him to have? Did you expect him to have a magic wand? And, we have to have math differently because it's racist. Or we can't have special programs that acknowledge people with special skills or achievement or acceleration or accomplishment, or the work that goes into being able to have that achievement. And we have become this society of, I don't want to say wimps, but here's a good way to look at it. So we're filming this on December 7th, okay? You think about the fact of what would have happened at Pearl Harbor if Pearl Harbor happened today. Would we have ever as a country had the balls to pull ourselves up after what happened on December 7th, the way we did back in 1941 today? There's no way. Do you think we would have ever had the ability to bring the country together to say, yes, there is an enemy. There is one enemy against this country, and they are wrong for what they did? That wouldn't happen today. Would we have the sacrifice that then happened with our parents and our grandparents who gave up so much, who gave up their lives, who gave up their families, the families who stayed at home that then went to work for the betterment of the country, not necessarily for themselves? For the people in other countries like in London that were living under air raid sirens every single day. Would we have had the courage to do that? I remember being in Pearl Harbor a few years ago, and you still see the oil coming up from the ocean, from the ships that were sunk, 60 years later, 70 years later. And so I don't think we as a society, if we ever got a blow like that today because of the woke society that we have, would ever have the ability to recover from that. And it's a sad thing, and it happens because, I think it happens because we do have people that are in charge, elected officials, that promote that kind of I don't want to say weakness, but that kind of mentality that says exactly what you had mentioned, which is, oh, look at that person. They got everything in the world, so I can take something from them. Or what's the big deal? There was one downtown in LA yesterday, I think. Some people outside the Intercontinental Hotel in downtown LA waiting for an Uber. Someone drives up in a car, they jump out, they pistol whip somebody, they grab their wallet, their Rolex, and their jewelry, and it's like on to the next item. and some people, not all, but some people look at that and say, well, those people were well off. They're at the hotel, Intercontinental Hotel. They had $100,000 worth of jewelry. They don't know the work that was done that those people did to be able to have that, and they don't respect it. And that's really a problem that we have, and it becomes more of a problem when it is enforced or enhanced by the government policies that we have or the government officials that we have. And we do have those government officials these days. The governor was shocked, over the smash and grabs. Dude, what the hell did you expect? You let people get away with stealing out of a CVS. Why wouldn't they go steal it at Nordstrom? In LA, you had these smash and grabs. 14 out of 14 people that were arrested, according to the chief of police of LAPD, out on the street because of no bail. I mean, what do you expect? People, you're right. It's human nature. People are going to take advantage of that.
Well, and it goes into, kind of putting it all together. It's excuses that these politicians and some of these, I want to say, these people within our communities who feel sorry for everyone else. And so you've got this whole criminal justice system. And look, and I get it. There are certain crimes where people end up inequities where, you commit a drug crime, you smoke pot, and people got sentenced for many years versus someone else from a different community that didn't. But the thing is, sometimes the pendulum swings a little too hard. And so what's happened over the last 10 years is a lot of laws have been passed to make it, to basically, as the governor says, reduce prison population. Now, he'd like to blame it on the courts and on a federal judge saying, well, you've got too many people in jail. And so you got to reduce the population. So what did they do? They reduced the crimes. And so what used to happen is you commit a crime, you had a penalty. What happens now is you commit a crime and we're going to try to figure out a way to rehabilitate you, or we're going to send you down to the jail system, no longer prison. We'll send you to the jail system. And now the jails are overcrowded. And so they themselves is like, okay, well, we have no room, so we'll have to figure out a way to get you out. But it's all of it comes down to a lot of these folks feeling sorry for other people. And look, and I'm good about giving someone a second chance. But I've got an issue when it's a third, fourth, fifth, or 123rd chance, as we have another woman, and we'll make sure we put all these things in the comments area, who was caught, who's committed 130 some crimes for stealing, gets arrested, and then gets released out on zero bail, and then goes and commits another crime, another theft. And so at what point do you say maybe 130 times is too many? At what time do you say maybe 3 or 4 times is too many? At what times do you say, let these people sit in jail? That's where some people belong there. Exactly.
You commit a crime until you get, especially a violent crime. Yeah. I mean, and you've got what's her name? AOC out in New York, another great safe place, right? And she's talking about how, I think, I'm not sure that there's really all these smash and grabs that are going on in California. It's not really that big of a thing. There's a security guard in Oakland, California, retired police officer who is dead because he tried to intervene in a smash and grab on a TV news camera people that were out in Oakland. I mean, there are people getting hurt. There are people getting scared. There are people getting, murdered. They had the socialite, I forgot her name, Avant, here in L.A., Avant, who was, a huge philanthropic person who was murdered by someone who has a lengthy criminal record for murder, assault, and everything else. Why is that person on the street? That person shouldn't be on the street. And so, it really is amazing to me when you then hear AOC says, well, it's not really a big thing. And you hear the governor says, well, I'm really shocked by what's going on. Why are you shocked? Common sense. You don't need a criminology degree. You don't need a psychology degree. You don't need any damn degree except a common sense degree that says if you keep letting these people out on the street with no punishment, they're going to keep doing what they've been doing. It's called parenting, for Christ's sake. When you were young and you kept doing something over and over and your parents kept scolding you to make sure you didn't do it again. I mean, we just let these people go with no consequence. What do you expect? And that's why I think, people are looking at it, and I think people around the country And it's interesting because when people see the smash and grabs in California, people outside of California, and they say, how can they get away with that? I mean, what's going on in California? And then you explain to them the background, that there are laws that say there's no bail, no cash bail. The Attorney General of the state of California proudly boasts on his website that he was one of the main pillars of people that of the policy to get rid of no cash bail.
Right.
You know, if you don't have that accountability, this is what happens. And people are like, you got to be kidding me. You know, how do you got people that are repeat offenders and you know, they get arrested and then they're released.
Well, and then the maddening part, I think, for you and me and a lot of other folks who understand this is that you got, as you mentioned, the governor then acts all surprised, like, and then the attorney general acts all surprised, like, hey guys, you guys were the ones who supported this legislation. You guys are the ones who put your names on this legislation and the ones who made sure it got passed. You raised money to make sure it got passed. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden it's like, no, this legislation didn't impact it this way. You know, this is something different. It's like, no, it all stems from there. But
well,
I think
the one thing I want to correct you on, though, is the governor is shocked.
I know.
The attorney general, it was interesting. The attorney general this morning went after the police chief of Beverly Hills, because the police chief of Beverly Hills talked about Prop 47 and some of these other pieces of legislation that became law that put people back out on the streets with no bail. And the attorney general of the state of California then went after the police chief of Beverly Hills, who's trying to keep his community safe, and said, well, that's not the case. Police have all of the tools that they need to stop this from happening. I mean, you know, again, there are consequences when you have elected officials that, you know, and I just keep going back to the same point. This is not a you know, misfit island somewhere in the middle of the Pacific, okay? This is San Francisco. Major people, Speaker of the House, Attorney General of the state, Governor of the state, Vice President of the United States, they're all major policymakers for our state and our country. And this is where they come from. People
and it's a mentality that comes in. I partly blame it, too, on this mentality of, you know, seventh place trophies, you know, where everyone needs to feel okay within society. Everyone needs to feel, you know, like no one's feelings are hurt or damaged. And it's like, welcome to reality. As you get older, it's, you know, my mom used to say, it's like, you know, we say, well, that's not fair. My mom's like, whoever said life was fair?
Right.
Whoever said life was fair? Right. And this is coming from an immigrant, you know, who's like, no, you figure it out. You know, and I even tell this to my girls, is like, every problem has a solution. Figure it out. Mm-hmm. You know, I remember one time she was on the mound and, you know, and she was pitching and there's a large hole, you know, because after, you know, the second game or so forth, the pitchers have that large hole. And she's like looking out. And I finally just told her, I said, what do you want me to do about it? You're the one on the mound. Figure it out. And we had a lengthy conversation afterwards, which is basically, when you're there on the mound, it's not like anyone else can go there and fill up the hole for you.
Right.
You figure it out. And in life, that's what it's all about. You figure out your situation. You can't wait to everyone else to figure it out for you.
Right.
And this woke math, this hating on people who are successful. I mean, that's the other thing that I think that's driven me crazy, is hearing, you know, from some of our youth and hearing from some of the other folks, like, well, I don't like, you know, we can't like this one person because look at how much money they have. I mean, you look at someone like Edison, who, you know, came up with a light bulb. I mean, he went through a 1,000-step process, or 1,000 different ways to try to come up with the light bulb to make it turn on. And I remember someone had asked him, was like, what did it feel like to fail 1,000 times? He goes, I didn't fail 1,000 times. It was just a 1,000-step process. Mm-hmm. And it's just a different way of looking at things. Yeah, it's a different mentality. And he talked about all these other inventions. I had been reading this passage on him, and he says, you know, I figured out 1,000 ways in which later on to be successful. And part of it was 100,000 ways in which to be successful with all of his different types of inventions. And his idea was, I had to go through all these steps in order to find success in these areas. Mm-hmm. And I think people are, you know, they want that instant gratification. If they've got to work for something or they see someone else who succeeds, it's like, no one sees the background. No one sees the hard work.
Right.
No one sees how many hours some of these businesses or business owners stay up at night or work on their inventory or work on their craft. But they only see the success. They see, okay, they've got a nice house now. They see that they maybe, that they live in a nicer neighborhood. They drive a nicer car, but no one sees the sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. They just want everybody deserves the same thing. I mean,
Right.
by the way, that's socialism. just to educate everybody, everybody gets the same thing no matter how little or how hard you try. I mean, you're all entitled to the same piece of the pie.
Right.
And there are people that believe that. AOC's one of them. I mean, that there are people. Gavin Newsom is one of them. Rob Banta is one of them. I mean, that's what they believe. And it's what I say all the time. I mean, this is still a democracy. It's up to us as voters who believe differently to make sure that we don't have those kind of people representing us. And if we do, then we get the country in the situation that we deserve. But there are people that just look at it and say, well, I'm entitled to that. If someone else has it, then I should have it too. And when what happens is when we have people that try and find excuses for that kind of behavior, that's when it really breaks apart. As opposed to holding people's feet to the fire and accountability, and they say, well, you're right, so-and-so has so much, you don't have as much, so, you should get something too. And again, I just look at it and say, I don't know where all of that started or where all of it, ultimately ends up, but it means we've got a weaker country and a weaker society. I do firmly believe that. I mean, if you don't have accountability for these people that are doing all of these things that are impacting and affecting people's lives, then there's no reason not for them to do it. And if you've got a situation where people who are in charge say, yes, everybody deserves a participation award, or if someone 5 people have a Rolex and you don't have a Rolex, well, you should have a Rolex, and that's not the way it should be.
Well, it's funny, Mike. I've actually lost a couple college friends, on this particular topic, and part of it, you're in school and no one's got money. Everyone's kind of going through school itself, and you reconnect later on, 20 years later, or so forth. And I remember going out and grabbing a drink with some of these friends, and they were just, it just became like a bitch fest about, life is so hard and this sucks, and I wish I was making more money. And it's just like, and it's fine. I mean, we can all bitch and complain, right? But then it goes on, and then next time it goes on, and next time on, and finally I just got tired and I said, well, why don't you learn a new skill? Why don't you figure it out, rather than coming out drinking here, why don't you go spend from like 6 o'clock to midnight and pick up a new skill set? Go do something different. Yeah, that went over like a lead balloon, but I just got tired of it.
Call them back and tell them if they think it's tough now, it doesn't get any goddamn easier as you get older, pal. Let me tell you. It doesn't get any easier. But, you're right. I mean, some people just want to complain. And that's why, I use the December 7th analogy, because, when you think about where we were as a country and everything else and what happened to us and the devastation that it caused and the gut punch that it was, you just wonder if a society today that ever got hit the same way would have the capability to pick itself up, pull itself together, and go forward. I honestly, sadly, don't think it would. Yeah. I really don't. I think we would be finding excuses to apologize and reasons why we got bombed. I would think we would probably, look at it and say, well, we got what we deserve. There'll be a section that says we got what we deserved. Asking people to sacrifice the way they sacrificed, keeping the lights out in the house and to preserve electricity, or working 12-hour shifts to, manufacture things that our soldiers needed overseas, and with no really intrinsic or monetary reward for that. the greater good above, the individual gratification. I don't think we're there. I think we've lost that. I really do, and it's a pretty scary thing.
Oh, and and it's one of the reasons they've been called that area. It's been called the greatest generation. Mm-hmm. It's an absolute self-sacrifice for the country itself, for the greater good, for your neighbor. And don't get us wrong. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of great people out there. There's a lot of people who still believe in the entrepreneurial spirit, who still believe in, our men and women in uniform, who still believe in a law enforcement, and support them. I mean, I've had my run-ins with the law a couple of times in the sense of, getting pulled over in a car because they want to see if the vehicle was stolen. And I got pulled out of the vehicle or sat down. I've been handcuffed before. And, could I go out there and complain or bitch and complain about the treatment? I can. But at the end of the day, I realize that there's going to be a couple bad apples in any situation. But I'm still supportive of our law enforcement. I still believe that, here's a group of people that wake up every single morning and really don't know if they're going to come home or not. Mm-hmm. It's very few careers that have that. And so, I feel the same way about our firefighters. They could hang out in their station and they can, until they have a fire. But hey, once that fire rolls in, or once they got to fight that wildfire, I mean, they're in harm's way, and I mean, they're dealing with situations that you and I would never deal with. Fully geared up, flames blowing back and forth, not knowing how that wind's going to shift, and they're on the front lines trying to protect some stranger's home, mm-hmm. and doing it because they've got that duty to do. Right. And so I hope that there's enough people out there that can have that conversation with their kids about, and maybe I don't mean to smack them around physically, but I mean, maybe verbally, have that conversation with them. Yes, I know. Good Lord. But
I've never been pulled out of the car and handcuffed, but there was one time with handcuffs, but I don't want to get into it. But that's another story for another day.
But I mean, have that conversation with the kids and say, look, work for what you got.
Right.
And at the same time is, if you see someone successful, don't hate on them. Just, because you don't know their story. Well, you don't know where they came from. You don't know how hard they had to work. You don't know the sacrifices. Or the other thing is how many times their businesses have failed, or their businesses have gone bankrupt, or they've had to leverage everything they've had just to try to get to where they're at right now.
Correct. That's absolutely right. You don't know their story. You don't know what went into that work. It's very similar to athletes. You turn on the game on Sunday and you see these athletes doing amazing things. You don't see the study that they do during the week. You don't see the weight room stuff that they do. You don't see the repetition that they do over and over and over again. The one thing I would say on a positive note is the fact that there was this guttural, instinctive reaction to the restaurant in San Francisco that asked those police officers to leave, that enough people and organizations and folks that support the police, caused enough pressure that the owners of the restaurant changed their tune. Now, I'm not saying they changed their tune because they changed their beliefs. I don't think they changed their beliefs. They changed their tune because it affected their bottom line. Right. Which again, I think is the most ironic thing of all, because they're putting, they're this safe place, but it's only a safe place if I don't lose money from it. If I'm going to lose money from it, or my business is going to get hurt by it, well, it's not really, I don't want it to be a safe place. I want it to be a profitable, safe place. Right. But I think enough people just instinctively, without a whole lot of prodding or encouragement, just had that guttural reaction of, this is insane. To especially, in a place where crime is rampant, chaos is rampant, people are getting away literally with murder. People just, I think their senses were offended enough that they said, they put enough pressure on this restaurant to make them think twice because of their bottom line. So I think that's a positive step. But as long as, I'm going to go back to it, as long as we have elected officials that believe that, and pass policies, because that's what drives things. They pass policies which allow these things to happen. And then when they do happen, they won't even admit to the fact that an unintended consequence occurred from what they did, and admit that happened and try and fix it. Instead, attacking the chief of police of Beverly Hills, who's trying to protect his community. As long as we have that, then we're going to have, like people like that passing laws, we're going to have issues.
Well, Mike, and as you talk about elected officials, and another kind of interesting dynamic we've seen this week is we've got in California, as we've got across the nation, we've got redistricting coming in, where a lot of the lines are being changed. There will be new Senate seats, new House seats or Assembly seats, and also congressional seats that are being drawn up across the country. And we're beginning to see a lot of folks who are stepping out and stepping away from elected office. We've got a couple of Democrats in California who, one of them got appointed by the governor to be a judge, and so there'll be a special election for his seat down in Southern California. We've got another state assembly member who's taken up a job as being the district attorney in San Francisco, so that seat will be up for a special election.
So his job as a legislator wasn't tough enough?
Yeah, he's decided to go out there and be DA. We've got also another individual by Fraser out in the Bay Area who's assembly member who's going to take a job over in transportation, that seat's going to be up for a special district. But I think one of the big one that happened this week is you got Congressman Devin Nunes, right, out of the Central Valley, who's indicated he's going to be stepping down at the end of the year, and really, there's going to have to be a special election in that particular seat. Yeah,
I think that's the one, at least in California, that came out of left field or right field in this case. No one, I don't think anybody really saw that coming. He's going to be the CEO of the new Trump social media conglomerate that's been created, and by leaving at the end of the calendar year, if he had waited, I think 90 days or something, then they wouldn't have had to have a special election. They could have just had the regular election in November, but they now have to have a special election. Who knows how that district's going to look when it's all said and done, when the lines are redrawn. And so we've got a lot of these kind of situations, not just here, but around the country, where you have folks that are, been in office for a while that are saying, well, I don't like the way the lines are being drawn, or, they drew me. There was one, who was it? Oh, it was the Republican in Illinois. Mm-hmm. I forgot his name, Kinsinger, I think his name is, who decided not to run because, he said they drew me out of my district. Mm-hmm. And when I hear politicians say they drew me out of my district, it's like, well, it's not really your district. It's actually the people's district, right. And they drew the line, out of your district. It's like, I don't think it's your district. It belongs to the people. But so we're going to have a lot of these open seats out there. But we're also going to have in California, based on what you just said, it sounds like we'll have at least 3, maybe 4 special elections. And elections cost money. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the thing too about this, is that, and certainly we heard that was one of the main battle cries of Newsom and his supporters in the failed recall, was that there's an election next year. If you don't like what the governor's doing, wait till next year and vote him out. Why are you spending forcing us to spend all of this money? I forgot how many millions it was to have a recall. But now it looks like, based on actions that have happened, we're going to have elections anyway.
Right.
And then have them again in November.
Well, no, have them again in June and then November, because we've got the primaries and then the general election in November. But you're also getting a different dynamic too. Is in Georgia, you've got Perdue, who was the governor of Georgia, that is looking to run against the
senator.
Senator.
David Perdue was the United States senator that got beat in a runoff this January, and he's running against, I think it's Brian Kemp, who's the current Republican governor of Georgia, who who's not on the good side of Donald Trump.
Right.
Let's put it that way. You know, he there's numerous stories about all of that. And so David Perdue decided this past week to jump into the race, have a Republican primary, which, you know, by all accounts I would expect to be a knockdown, drag out primary. You know, in terms of both candidates will have money, both candidates will have organization. You know, the one good thing about Georgia is they have a good U.S. Senate candidate running, Herschel Walker, a former football player. But that governor's race is going to be a knockdown, drag out, and then whoever wins, you know, ends up running against Stacey Abrams, who's a formidable candidate. I mean, whether you agree with her politics or not, and I certainly don't, she'll be a formidable candidate. Right. So, you know, we have those kinds of things. We got Dr. Oz, who's running in Pennsylvania.
Who's running as a Republican in Pennsylvania.
Who's running as a Republican in Pennsylvania. You know, and that one there is it's an open Republican Senate seat. Pat Toomey's retiring. And so that'll be another one. That's a key one for Republicans to be able to win, if they're going to hold, if they're going to be able to take control of the Senate. You know, so you have all these kinds of interesting races that are going on around the country that, as we get into 2022, you know, every indication is there's a red wave coming in November of 22. But, you know, it's December of 21, and we all know a lot can happen between now and then. But certainly, I think for the Republicans, having Nunes suddenly step down, you know, creates a challenge for the party to keep the seat first. You know, but it's an opportunity also. I mean, they did a remarkable job when what's her name in Simi Valley had to resign or decided to resign. And Republicans with Mike Garcia were able to win the special, and then even though he was heavily targeted, he won the general election again.
Oh, was it the triple or what was that? What was that? Was it that Congresswoman who was having an affair? She
was having an affair with one of her staffers, her female staffers.
But the husband was also dating her.
Right.
The staffer.
Right.
Yeah, I think I forgot what
it's called constituent service.
Constituent service. Yeah, I forgot. There's a word for like a triple or triple. I don't know. It's like somehow, yeah, it's bizarre word. But yes, her. Yes.
Yes, it's interesting. I don't know what's in the water up in Simi Valley. But you know, Garcia came in and out of nowhere he won, you know, the Republican primary. He won the special election. So Republicans really took that as an opportunity. You know, they have to make the same approach here with Devin leaving. He was obviously a strong candidate, targeted every time, survived every time, was a great fundraiser. You know, so it's an opportunity to keep the seat, but it's going to be an important one because, you know, you can't lose these things. You know, you can't lose a Pennsylvania, which was a Republican seat. You can't lose a Devin Nunes seat and expect to, you know, have the turnover in the House that is expected.
And part of the reason you mentioned that, just for everyone else to understand it, is right now that you've got the margins in the who controls the Senate is basically a tie that's broken by the vice president.
Right.
In the House or in Congress, you've got what, maybe less than a dozen seats that separates who controls the House of Representatives, Republicans and Democrats. So right now the Democrats control it, and so every one of these seats becomes important. But I think the other important thing is the deadline in California is December 27th for the redrawing of the districts. So we'll know how the congressional districts are drawn, the Assembly, Senate, Board of Equalization, and everything else in the middle. We'll know by December 27th, as I think we will for the rest of the country. And so It'll be interesting also to find out, because I know that there's already some preliminary maps that have gone out, and some of these members that happen to be a state senator in the current district happen to no longer be the state senator in that district by 2 houses. It's like they drew the lines like 2 houses over or 1 block over. So it'll be interesting to see how many people end up putting their house for sale and end up buying another house, or, as often happens, they go rent an apartment across the street, where that district is now. They now live in the district.
I don't know who it was, but to that point on the Republican side, there was, and I forgot the guy's name. There was someone who had said they were going to run against Maxine Waters in L.A. and then announced that, I think last night, after much consideration, which probably was all of about 5 minutes, decided they're going to run for Devin's open seat.
Navarro. The last name is Navarro.
Okay. And I'm trying to figure out, it's like, okay, Maxine Waters' district is down here in L.A. Devin's seat is up in the Central Valley. I mean, that must be one heck of a district that they redrew that takes up all of 99 and the 5 and the Grapevine and Bakersfield and Fresno. That must be one monster of a district to be able to run in both of them. People are smarter than that. I mean, give people a little due credit. And that, by the way, just as an aside, that's one of the criticisms of Dr. Oz. It's he put out, and sometimes politicians don't get this. He put out, his announcement video, of course, asking for money and everything else, and it was very professionally done. And his message was how, the country needs a doctor. Not a country doctor, but the country needs a doctor. But in the course of the thing, it was maybe a, 7-8 minute video, I think it was. He only mentions the word Pennsylvania once, and it's in the context of how he wants to bring to Pennsylvania what Donald Trump brought to America. And, it's just one of those things where I just wonder sometimes with the folks that do these things for these candidates, don't you get the fact that people will look at that, and in your introduction, you should talk about your roots, and you should talk about why you want to be the senator from Pennsylvania and what you want to do for Pennsylvania, as opposed to kind of like, they did a video and then insert word here of what state it is or what district it is. People are smarter than that. Give them credit for that.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how that one turns out. I know that one's just a statewide, so no lines. But for the other ones, I think it'll be interesting. Maybe the next couple of weeks we can get someone who's working on the redistricting maps to kind of come on and talk a little bit about them and what that means for the dynamic shift. Because even in the state legislature, do Republicans lose more seats in the state Senate and Assembly, or they have the opportunity to gain some seats?
Right.
And the other big important one is with California losing a congressional seat, what 2 incumbents have to now face each other, and this is also the time and the opportunity that gives a lot of other people the willingness to go and challenge an incumbent, because the district, could have 60% new constituents who don't know the current incumbent. So,
well, I would say, I was talking to someone last week, and they were thinking, do I run for local office? Do I run for Congress? Whatever. My advice, anyway, to Republicans is if you ever wanted to run for Congress, 2022 is the year to run, because I do think that right now there's going to be a huge wave. I mean, Massachusetts, perfect example. Charlie Baker, the Republican governor in Massachusetts, wildly popular, has served, I think, two terms now, 2 4-year terms. He's not running for re-election. Even though he's not termed out, he's decided he's not going to run for re-election. His lieutenant governor's not going to run for re-election. And I was talking to someone in Massachusetts last night, and we were talking about it, and they said, there's the person that ran against Elizabeth Warren will run as a Republican. And you look and you say, well, how's a Republican going to win in Massachusetts? I think 2022 is the kind of year where that could happen. So, I would say to any Republican that's looking at running is go for it. It's not going to be a better time, I think, than in 2022 to make that run. But you gotta put some thought to it. I mean, that's why I saw Dr. Oz, and I'm like, dude, I mean, it's like you mentioned the name of the state once. I mean, come on, man. To quote Uncle Joe, come on, man.
Well, sometimes you got the cookie cutter campaigns that make it nice and easy. I could use this campaign ad for this state, for this state, for this state, and so
there are people that do that.
Yeah. Well, Mike, let's leave it there,
right.
and let's get back together again this week for another rundown, a couple more issues. I know there are a bunch of other things we want to talk about. So
let me just throw one thing in there, two things in there. So if you're out eating and you see a first responder, police or fire in there, offer to buy them the meal. I mean, that's I see that on planes a lot when I fly. You see folks in uniform, men and women in uniform, and I've done it. You go to the flight attendant and you say, here's my credit card, see if they want something to eat or something to drink. Do that if you see those folks in there. Show your appreciation and your gratitude for the service and the sacrifice and the risk that they take. That's how I'll end this one.
Perfect. Well, Mike, great seeing you again. Talk to you soon.
Take care, everybody.